The anime begins in the demon realm, where the hero's party is facing off against the demon king, who proves to be extremely resilient and immensely powerful. One of the party members is exhausted. However, his companions manage to stop the demon king's attacks and the hero lunges at him, driving his sword into his head before everyone joins together for one final assault, finally defeating the demon king. Time passes and now all the heroes are celebrated throughout the kingdom. As a reward for helping and aiding the hero, the king grants the sages of fire, earth, water, and wine the title of the Four Emperors, a title reserved only for the most powerful mages. The wind sage is surprised since the title of emperor is normally reserved for those of noble blood, but even though it's only a title limited to the world of magic, it's still being granted to them. When it's the wind sage's turn before being honored, the king lets him know that even though he isn't the most powerful in the world of magic, he will still be granted the title, and from that day on he will be called the Lightning Emperor. He bursts into tears and thanks the king while everyone present quickly begins praising him. The Lightning Emperor thinks that his 40 years of magical study have finally been recognized, and in such a magnificent way. Years go by. Now the Lightning Emperor, whose name is actually Eftel, is interrupted by his young disciple who lets him know breakfast is ready. He thanks his little disciple Merlin and remarks that it's a great day for training. A while later we see Eftel training both Merlin and several other children. He has them balance a stone on their heads while concentrating on maintaining their magic circle. Once they finish that, he orders them to cast a level 4 spell. Merlin asks him why he doesn't rest a little, but Eftel replies that it isn't necessary since he isn't tired. She simply watches him with a hint of worry, while Eftel, seeing her expression, recalls that after defeating the demon king he found a demon mother and her small baby, and thinks that even though she surely doesn't remember it, he killed many members of her clan, which makes him feel unworthy of the worried way she looks at him. He tells the children it's time to keep practicing the level 4 spell, though Merlin asks him to teach them the level 6 spell instead. Eftel asks her why she's in such a hurry, and she replies that she wants to give her best in order to prove she's the star pupil of the great master Eftel, the Lightning Emperor. Eftel lets her know that the most important thing is building a solid foundation, and Merlin understands, though she replies that she has to hurry. Eftel looks at her with some confusion, but she asks him to forget about it. A little later, we see her looking somewhat anxious at the edge of a forest. She works up some courage and heads inside, making her way deeper and deeper until she finally reaches a cave in the middle of the woods. She feels she must defeat the monster inside that cave in order to become the Lightning Emperor's best student, so that she can teach everyone in her master Eftel's place, finally allowing him to rest and relax. Unfortunately, after a scene change, we see Merlin desperately fleeing from the cave monster since her level 4 magic proved useless, though in truth she has no intention of giving up and decides to go all in. She summons the wind spirits and recites the incantation to strike the monster directly, attempting to cast a level 6 spell. She's thrilled to see she managed to summon the spell. However, the monster keeps advancing as if nothing happened. It knocks her backward, and just as she's about to meet a grim end, a huge roar echoes through the area. Turning to look, Merlin sees her master, who looks quite irritated since he has already told her many times to stay away from that forest. Merlin apologizes while Eftel lets her know that she's his most talented student but that she's too impatient, and power gained in haste is very fragile. However, as Eftel is speaking, the monster gets back on its feet. Merlin panics at the sight of it and fear keeps her from speaking, though Eftel senses it and uses a level 10 spell to incinerate the poor wolf. Later that night, Merlin mentions that her master is amazing. Eftel tells her to go to sleep, but as she's about to head to her room, Eftel starts coughing and spits up blood. He asks Merlin if she already noticed, and she replies that she had, and that's why she'd been so eager to learn quickly. He's surprised to realize that's why she'd been pushing herself so hard. Merlin asks him to take care of himself and recommends he rest as much as he can, but Eftel gets up and reveals that he doesn't have much time left, so he can't afford to rest. She asks him why he keeps going, and Eftel strokes her head and tells her he wants to train talented students who will succeed him, just as she will. He tells her that in the past he wanted to become the strongest man in the world, every mage's dream, but unfortunately he never managed it, because reaching the top was simply impossible for him. Merlin replies that isn't true since the Lightning Emperor is the strongest of them all, and that very day he cast a level 10 spell with ease. Eftel simply thinks he understands why she'd say that, though compared to the other, younger sages, he alone, the oldest of them, had struggled against the Demon King. The next day, one of his students pounds on the door, and when Eftel goes out to answer, the boy tells him that the Flame Emperor has finished his theory on magical aptitude. He hands over all the details, and as Eftel skims through them, he's stunned, remarking that it's truly worthy of the Flame Emperor since that theory was believed to be impossible. The boy asks him what he plans to do now, and Eftel decides to put his old colleague's theory to the test. He gathers all his students and puts the theory into practice. First, he places a strand of hair from the test subject into each tube and they light up, changing color according to each element: earth, fire, water, and wind. The children notice the blue and green tubes glowing, and Eftel explains that, according to the theory, the intensity of the light and depth of color indicate a rank somewhere between E and S since green and blue are glowing the brightest. He assumes that means the subject has an S rank in water and wind. One of the students points out that the other two tubes aren't glowing much, which might mean the magic for those elements falls in the C or B rank. Merlin watches this and comments that, although it may not mean much to her, the man who raised her since she was a baby knows perfectly well that she has a strong affinity for water, wind, and earth as well. The current method of learning magic involves practicing basic spells of every type and after some time determining which one suits you best. But with this new method, it will be possible to know someone's greatest talent from birth, allowing young mages to become far stronger. Eftel asks the kids to test him as well. Merlin tells him it isn't necessary, though the rest of the children are dying of curiosity. Eftel wants to try it because even though he never managed to reach the highest level of magic, he wants to know if he ever actually had the talent to achieve it, since he worked hundreds of times harder than anyone, far harder than any other emperor. That's why he wants to know if he might have had great talent for some element after all. However, the tubes don't light up, and the boy from before comments that, according to the theory, if none of them show a specific color, it means the subject has no aptitude at all. He adds that it's impossible for Eftel to lack it. Merlin agrees, and Eftel thinks that having no aptitude would mean none of the spirits favor him. So then, why didn't the tubes light up when he's the Lightning Emperor? Merlin suggests maybe they made a mistake with the procedure and recommends trying again, and Eftel, worried, asks them to redo it, certain they must have made an error. However, no matter how many times they tried, the tubes never changed color. He's left frustrated, wondering why. He knows perfectly well that he was always slower than everyone else at learning magic, but now he can finally understand the reason he could never surpass the other emperors. The only explanation is that he never had any aptitude for magic at all. His frustration begins to take its toll and his illness flares up again. Time passes and Eftel's condition worsens. Merlin tries to help him, but he asks her to wait outside. In his room, Eftel keeps thinking that he always believed he could reach the highest levels of magic, but he could never break through that wall called talent. With that result, his hopes died. He feels ashamed of being so pathetic. He thinks that if only he'd had a little more time, he might have changed something, but all his effort amounted to nothing, and sadly, Eftel ends up dying frustrated. Suddenly, something happens, and he awakens the ability of a second reincarnation. Now in a strange white space, he recalls that 50 years had already passed, and that he'd forgot he even had that ability. He mentions this to a mysterious figure he'd met in that space after having taken his own life in a different world. This figure, a strange, well-endowed goddess, welcomes him and lets him know that his unbreakable ability was what allowed him to push himself to his limit. He finally understands why he could never give up, and now she tells him that the time has come for his second reincarnation, and that he can once again gain extra starting abilities. She asks him what he thinks about doubling his growth rate, but he replies that it isn't necessary since he still retains his magical knowledge and only needs more time to keep pushing himself and improving. She tells him that it's very much like him that despite lacking magical aptitude, he still managed to become one of the 4 emperors, and that was thanks to his sheer force of will. She asks if he's ready and he says yes, thanking her for this second chance at life. After a flash of light, Eftel wakes up in a small body. He sits up, startled, and his memories quickly come flooding back. Leaving the room, he goes to look at himself in the mirror and is immediately hugged by his mother, who also calls him Eftel. He realizes that, thanks to his second reincarnation ability, he's now living his third life. By the time he turns 4, the memories of the old Eftel begin returning to him, and now, in this third chance at life, he's determined to master magic. That morning, he remembers the method for testing magical aptitude, so without wasting any time, he runs off to try it. Unfortunately, just like in his previous life, the same thing happens, and while he's lost in thought in the garden, he spots an enormous black dragon flying overhead. Noticing its crimson eyes, he wonders if someone must have made it angry, and sure enough, the knights come charging in right behind it. Eftel instinctively starts running, but then remembers he's no longer at his peak. He's only 4 years old, so what could he possibly do? He regrets that if only he'd known this would happen, he would have reincarnated into a body capable of using magic. However, he remembers his own original spell, the one he created himself, level 10 Eftel. When he tries it, he manages to cast it, and a powerful magic circle appears before him, disintegrating the dragon in an instant and leaving Eftel completely stunned as he realizes he was reborn into this world able to use the magic from his past life at its very fullest.